Good evening, everyone. Do you hear me? Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming tonight. My name is Alba Baeza. I'm a curator at Public Art Agency Sweden, Statens Konstråd. It's a pleasure to have you all here today for an evening of discursive exchanges around the newly inaugurated artwork Future Island by OOZE and Marjetica Potrč. I will present briefly what Statens Konstråd does, what our mission is, and I will then give the room to Lotta Mossum, curator of the project, as well as the artists who will have a conversation today, a presentation of the project that will be followed by a conversation with our two guests for the evening, Cecilia Åsberg and Karim Jebari. Let me briefly, as I was saying, introduce Public Art Agency Sweden for those of you who are not familiar with us. We are a governmental agency that specializes in commissioning new artworks in the public space, and we also acquire existing artworks, and we have a collection that is placed throughout Sweden in different state buildings, different administrations and authorities. The purpose of Statens Konstråd, Public Art Agency Sweden, which was founded in 1937, has been, since its origins, to support the artistic ecosystem of Sweden, as I was saying, through commissions and acquisitions, among other. And today we have the unique chance to discuss one of those commissions, Future Island, that has recently been inaugurated in Campus Albano in the north of Stockholm. So I would like to welcome to the stage curator Lotta Mossum, who will give a brief introduction of the project, and will be soon joined by OOZE and Marjetica Potrč. Thank you, Lotta.
Okay, already 2014, when I was involved in the project of Albano, there was a strong ambition to include sustainability aspects in the planning and building process. And one example of this was that scientists from Stockholm Resilience Center and KTH Architecture finalized 2010 a document called Q-Book Albano that investigated how socio-ecologically resilient campus area could be built. And taking the starting point from this, the art program was named Anthropocene, and was a call on artists who worked with problematizing the climate challenges. Also, it could be that they challenged the position of culture, nature, that they also investigated multiple time aspects and holistic point of view, including also more than human aspects. And when we chose OOZE and Potrč to make a proposal, it was, among other things, also because of their previous work in King's Cross Pond Club in London, that they constructed on a construction site. They made a swimming pool where they purified the water totally by natural processes, plants, mineral, etc. And this made it possible only for 163 people per day to bathe. And this also inherent limit that only 163 people could bathe each day, and also in the experience of doing that in this naturally cleaned water, also give a very intuitive and sensuous understanding of the climate challenges.
Thank you very much, Lotta. As we were saying, this is a brief introduction, but we'd like to welcome the artists on stage so that they can themselves tell us about the project. Thank you, Marjetica Potrč and OOZE, who are Eva Pfannes and Sylvain Hartenberg. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here tonight. We hope you're feeling happy about this process. It's taken a number of years, as Lotta was saying. These commissions are usually long, but we've finally come to a beautiful result. The floor is yours.
Alba. Thank you, Lotta. As you see, meet the art and the artists. We, Eva, Sylvain, and myself, we collaborated on the project for 7 years. It was a very intense time and a beautiful time. Also, we extended the collaboration to the whole team, not only Lotta, Johan, the curators, but also to the team that was working on site. Just an amazing process, the work which we created is called Future Island, which we call living artwork. For various reasons, we'll talk about it. It's just like a short presentation now that we will show a story of its becoming. Yeah.
So when we arrived 7 years ago in October, Albano campus looked like this, and we were really taken away by the amount of rocks that we found on the side, and we more or less immediately decided to work with this material, which was possible because we were so early, so it could actually be taken and stored somewhere else close by and then brought back. All these rocks had to go to make space for the new campus, and we then brought together the rocks, which are almost 1,800 million years old, brought these together with the future. So we wanted, at that time, it was really started to heat up. One could see maps where especially the north of the globe was heating much faster than the south. And we wanted to create a space where you could actually physically experience this. So we decided to create an island on the campus in the landscape where the north would be 5 degrees warmer always, whatever is the temperature.
Yeah, and I have to just add that why plus 5 degrees, it's when you do nothing, this is plus 5 degrees Celsius. So we will have a territory, like you see it here between red and blue, where you can actually compare different living experience of the plants that will grow there.
So we then started the process of collaborating with the scientists on Albano campus, also inspired, as Lotta mentioned, by the Q book. And when we presented this drawing, we had intense discussions with the scientists who basically at first vividly said, okay, it won't be a line and you might not see anything, but then after some consideration, they thought, no, actually you would see something. Basically what would evolve, and the experiment is now to plant the same species everywhere and then see how they evolve. And we started having discussions about the sort of biological and species, how they migrate, in fact, from the south, further up north, as we speak. Species move continuously, which is forbidden for humans, by the way. And so here we see the technical aspect of this, how it's heated.
So basically we have two systems to heat the island, so let's say underground systems, and we wanted also to create some sort of more environment, so we have clusters of stones which are heated by a heat pump, which is powered by photovoltaics.
So we just illustrate some of those discussions, which we then also had with the builders on this immense campus. So that's around probably 5 years ago, which then became a sort of drawing out the island in the sand, as it were. And we discovered a bedrock, which we had to integrate, which is the big rock you see here in the middle. And then bit by bit, we would actually work with the builders who also built Albano campus to bring back the rocks, bring back the gravel, and literally construct this gigantic sculpture with the rocks that we have on site. This one here is about one of the biggest. 10 tons was the limit. But otherwise, it was really an amazing process where we had literally almost no limits. Whatever we wanted to do could be done by the amazing excavator drivers, giving instructions like now via the sort of phone, and then trying to see how we can construct this purely with gravity. So it's obviously not rectangular rocks, but it all slides and moves. And we had to sort of learn how to construct with this gigantic weight, which once you put it down, it's just there. It just doesn't move anymore. These are all railway used I-beams that we use to protect the heat pipes. So this is like an underfloor heating. So here you see again from the same perspective, still without the water. Then contractors came to sort of insert the heat pipes.
Yeah, so basically we had a certain number of rocks that we could drill. And we had about 30 rocks, and then we created this kind of cluster with the heat pipes. And here you can see also that the aesthetic was quite important for us, how to integrate the heating system so that it's visual, but not too overpowering in communicating the heating situation. Maybe Marjetica, you want to say something about this?
Planting plants, that's very important. We like to be always involved in all stages, not only planning, but also doing it together. Yes?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that literally everybody planted on the island, curators team, scientists, even recently Thomas from Akademische Hus also planted quite a lot of plants there. So it's a total collective action, the planting on the project.
Yeah, and finally the water came. So the water that you see here is actually rainwater that is collected from Albano campus and then sort of recirculated. And that water is obviously also feeding the species. You also see on the island, you see sort of, we have like upstairs there's a model where you can see this better. We have sort of 3 niches which are more protected from the wind, where different species can evolve, and they all planted on gravel, so that the plants over time, this is an artwork over the next 100 years, so over time the plants, they will start as pioneer plants, they will make their own soil, and then the vegetation will evolve. We also planted a couple of tiny oak trees, that we will see hopefully growing over the next decades, 100 years, and that's it.
Yeah, and here is the scene.
Yeah.
Perfect timing. Thank you. Thank you. Please take a seat if you'd like to. Sylvain, also here. And I would also like to welcome to the stage our 2 guests, or our 2 further guests for tonight. Karim Jebari, welcome, and Cecilia Åsberg. Yes, please. Karim is a researcher at the Institute for Future Studies. You're writing a book right now on climate crisis and the future of humanity. And you have a very broad range of interests, from the social impact of emerging technologies to long-term risks to human civilization. And you have published several articles and participated in a number of research projects in the field of bioethics, philosophy of artificial intelligence, and human enhancement. Thanks for being here tonight. And we also have Professor Cecilia Åsberg. Cecilia Åsberg has been working also for a long time with existential, ethical, and more than human questions, especially in those that she situates in what you call post-natural contemporary time. Cecilia is also the director for the Post-Humanities Hub, which is a multi-university research group founded in 2008 in Stockholm, which also serves
Linköping even.
Linköping, ursäkta mig. But now in Stockholm.
No, it's fine, it's fine.
Apologies.
We move around actually, so we've been at KTH, but now we're back at Linköping University.
Now you're back at Linköping, good. And the group also, the hub also serves as a collaboratory platform for various disciplines, for art, science, philosophy, technology. So thanks again for being here with us tonight. The idea now is we will invite our 5 guests to have an exchange of ideas and to sort of discuss the possible ramifications that an artwork like Future Island raises, the questions that it raises in also in relation to your fields of study. So we have half an hour for this, and then there will be some time for questions and comments from the audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this nice introduction. And thank you to Statens konstråd for inviting me to try to, give a little bit of context and engage in this seriously cool conversation with, across many disciplines and types of practice, actually. So, okay, we live in really, really troubling times, right? We live in times in need of multiple and really versatile approaches in art, in academic research, and in society at large. The big question of our time concerns really what to do. What can we all of us do when there seems to be no innocent position to be had, really? The climate crisis is no longer really a future prospect, but unfolding before our very eyes. It's crossing boundaries and set CO2 limits of all kinds. The artwork, Future Island, asks us, actually very much like the IPCC climate science experts, to prepare for a world 5 degrees warmer. A world 5 degrees warmer than today could expect falling harvests, of course, in all countries worldwide, food shortage following from that, sea level rise threatening major cities like Stockholm, and significant water shortage. So higher temperatures, melting polar ice caps, flooding and wildfires wreak havoc already with increasing frequency. So it's not really future anymore. It's happening now, right now. It's happening unevenly across the world. And the most vulnerable peoples, those of racialized and feminized poverty and a long legacy of exploitation in the global south, are of course inevitably hit the hardest. Exploitation and extractivism seems out of bounds. No limits to growth are accepted. In addition to increasing mass movements of migrants, people and non-humans, to increasing income inequalities and global polarizations, we see actually also today a resurgence of white nationalism and right-wing populism. We bear witness today to a renewed European war, to the violence of old and recurring Russian imperialisms working alongside long-standing Euro-modern and white settler supremacists of the global north. So the number of weaponized conflicts and border breaches seems to have actually doubled in the world in the last 10 years. Scary. We face energy crisis and very nested environmental problems, such as invasive species, diminishing biodiversity, lack of bees, and other crucial life-sustaining insects. We face oil spills, harmful toxins, gas leaks, and sea eutrophication. And actually, for all of us here, the Baltic Sea, close by, is a global worst-case contender. We face the contamination of drinking water. And there is actually a little bit of Barbie in all of us. And I'm, of course, speaking about the microplastics.
And we face urban urban air pollution, and not only here in Sweden, but all over the world. And the global COVID-19 pandemic recedes still, with looming threats of new multi-species contagions appearing from, I would say, our disrespectful treatment of non-human animals all over the world. It could be new strains of swine or bird flu, like the African swine flu now in Fagersta. Or let us think in the medical science registers of health and healthcare. It could be antibiotic-resistant bacteria like MRSA or MBD-TB, tuberculosis. How do you say that? Tuberculosis, yes. So there are many possible contenders or many possible threats, and it's all kind of nested together. So all of this belie this idea we have that you can separate nature and ecologies from people and culture and art. You cannot. The troubles of the world respect, in fact, today very few boundaries. They save neither bodily, national, or they respect neither bodily, national, or disciplinary integrity. And to add insult to injury here, amidst all these crises, our news, our information, our knowledge, and our social media channels seems to provide angles and perspectives that basically reflect back more of ourselves. They mirror or exaggerate our own limited sense of self in a world full of rampant individualism, where we should be thinking in terms of connectivity, in terms of relations, and solidarity, and even sometimes grandiose narcissism. So nested problems and entangled crises define the present. And this is manifested in the nested what-if scenarios of Future Island. Future Island, I claim, act like a refuge or a sanctuary for future climate scenarios, for our imagination of what will happen, but also for future biodiverse Anthropocenes. So in kind of that sense of golf courses where you have water ponds, where there are a lot of amphibians and frogs that actually thrive, which is fantastic. So it's kind of a last refuge. And this is why our art, our research, our societal mindset should be honing the skills of reimagination, of thinking in nested ways, in complicated ways. And I promise you that actually gender studies, environmental humanities, or practices of post-humanities of all kinds have a lot to offer in this regard. So to close up, Future Island, I really strongly feel, is this invitation for us all to think across nested problems, across multiple and entangled problems. And in a struggling world, riddled with all these nested crises and societal challenges that mix medical, political, scientific, humanistic, technological, and ecological challenges, we need to combine our efforts. That is basically my main message. And when we were actually talking in the kitchen, always know that in the kitchen, that's where the good conversations are happening. So in the kitchen, we discussed that we wanted to talk about time, right? And place. And we wanted to talk about this idea of a refuge or a sanctuary. And we also wanted to talk about knowledge practices, right? And lastly, hope. Thank you. So to be continued.
Thank you, Cecilia. And on that cue, I would like to give the word to Karim also.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you so much for that. That was super interesting. So yeah, on the topic, is it okay if I stand?
Yes.
I was feeling a bit uncomfortable there. Yeah, so I have two thoughts on the topics of time and space, and I think that they relate to this project. And I haven't been there myself, but I saw some pictures and your process. It seems fantastic. So I think time is, as related to this project and the climate crisis, is quite paradoxical, I think. So about 250 million years ago, there was one of the worst mass extinction events in the history of life on this planet. And that mass extinction event was partly caused by carbon dioxide, released not by humans that time, but by volcanoes. And that event killed a large fraction of all land-living and sea-living animals and plants, by increasing the temperature, by creating a runaway greenhouse effect. And that release of carbon dioxide was, in geological terms, extremely quick. It was in a blink of an eye. It was in only 200,000 years. So this is what I'm talking about, that there's the juxtaposition of geological time and human time. For us, 200,000 years is the history of modern humans. For the planet is, the blink of an eye. And then if we come back to our situation, we are releasing carbon dioxide at many times that speed. So we're pretty far from reaching the absolute levels of that disaster, of that catastrophe. Back then, maybe temperatures increased by around 15 degrees Celsius. So we're quite far from that. But we're doing it at a speed that is extremely fast in comparison. At the same time, I mean, we've been doing this for like 150 years. And most of the carbon dioxide has been released in the last 30 years. And at the same time, climate change, even though it's extremely fast, even in a historical sense, in human history terms, it's very slow in political terms. So I think we can be fairly confident that if climate change was something that was unfolding over a couple of years or decades, politicians would have acted more quickly. And we can say that with some confidence because the ozone crisis had that kind of time dynamic to it. And the ozone crisis was, for those of you who don't remember it or are too young, it was a really, really urgent crisis, and showed in a very hopeful way that humanity's leaders could come together and do something about the problem. Of course, that problem was much easier than the one we had now, but I think that the dynamic of time of that crisis was part of it. So we have a crisis that is extremely fast, but at the same time too slow. And I think that if you look in the future, the climate crisis also has this feature that it's not only about the magnitude of warming, it's also about the timing. So because it's for countries that are poor, as you mentioned, like for example Bangladesh, it makes a huge difference if we get to 3 or 4 degrees in 10 years or 20 years, or 40 or 50 years. Because that difference can buy them time to build protection against flooding. They can build electricity systems that are safe. They can become more wealthy, so they can buy air conditioning, and so on and so forth. So from a human welfare perspective, from human life perspective, 20 years matters a lot. And I think this is an aspect in the climate discourse that's not being taken into sufficient consideration. And one way we can do that is by focusing on short-lived but fast-acting climate greenhouse gases. So rather than focusing maybe on CO2, which is slow-acting and stays in the atmosphere for a very long time, we could focus on hydrofluorocarbons, for example, or nitrous oxide, or methane, or carbon particles, which have a much, much greater effect on a shorter time span. And I think finally, just to say one thing about the aspect of time, is that the climate crisis is not going to be over by 2050. When in the best case scenario, we're going to fix everything, shut down all the coal power plants, all the fossil cars. Let's imagine that. That's not going to stop back then. We need to continue to stay at zero for hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years. So the climate crisis, or the solutions that we're proposing here, they need to be feasible not only in a 10 or 20 year horizon, but in a hundreds of years horizon. So I think that's also an important aspect to consider. And it's not going to be easy because human activity produces carbon dioxide almost automatically. I mean, I'm producing carbon dioxide at the moment when speaking. So yeah, of course we can plant a tree, and then because relatively speaking, it's not that much. But like human activity is inextricably linked with carbon dioxide. So if we want to keep that at zero for hundreds or maybe thousands of years, we need to think about that time perspective as well. And just very shortly about the space. So I think that the climate crisis is not an environmental crisis, or that's one kind of pitch that I want to make in the book that you mentioned. I think that in normal environmental crisis, we think about the locality, right? We think about place. We think about local mines, local pollution, et cetera, et cetera. But climate crisis, the kind of distinctive feature of it is that it's global, which means that the kind of old idea that, think globally, act locally, as they said in, Rio, the Rio conference 1991. I remember I was in school and had to do these kind of globes and pictures. That doesn't really work for the climate crisis. We need to kind of think globally, but also act globally. And that means that a lot of ideas about what's good for the environment need to be reimagined or rethought. And that's why I think it was really good, your point about that we need new imaginaries. And we need also new tools to deal with genuine conflicts of interests. Like there are some people that have a right to the land and it's morally wrong to displace them. But at the same time, we might need those metals, or we might need that land for whatever project that is going to, that might create a big difference in terms of climate change. So, and there are no kind of good answers to what we should do about this. But these are the kind of genuine moral dilemmas that we need to deal with. And we cannot just pretend that whatever is good for the local environment is going to automatically be good for the global environment. So in that sense, I think that the climate crisis threatens to dissolve our notion of space and our connection to the local space in a way that is kind of alien to many of us, I think. So yeah, that was just a couple of thoughts.
Thank you very much. Jen. Good. So after these fantastic presentations that give us a bit of insight into your fields of work and research, I would like to invite Eva, Sylvain, and Marjetica to, I don't know, jump into the conversation.
It looks like I'm jumping in. I was here for these presentations, and I was just reminded when you talked about Bangladesh. If I'm not wrong, Bangladesh politicians and its people actually gave the rights, like a personhood of nature, to all rivers in Bangladesh, which I think is an amazing achievement by politicians in the times when also this very vulnerable territory is so much exposed to climate change. Why I'm talking about it, because I think personally that our human relationship with nature is the biggest challenge for, let's say, for our survival, or to keep inhabiting the world we call the house, which is our, the planet Earth. So our relationship with nature, and I do believe that these times when the climate crisis is building up, we are changing from being owners to being caretakers. And just jumping forward to the constitutions that so many countries, especially I think now about Latin America, Bolivia and like Ecuador, but also the Chile, the constitution that was supposed to be, which is not, but also from, I'm talking about constitutions because that actually protect nature, and also embrace nature as a somehow not a friend, but we live with nature, like what Latin Americans say when they talk about Pachamama, Mother Nature. I also have a story to tell from Slovenia. I come from Slovenia, and we have the right to water in the constitution, and when there was an attempt by let's say the government to actually change the protected water resource into endangered resource, people stood up and they voted in the referendum to protect water resources. So I do believe that we are also guardians of our constitutions. So I see a very practical stand for humans here, relationship with nature.
I think, Karim, you have already.
Yeah, just to be a bit contrarian, but so I think I kind of disagree a little bit, or I don't think it's bad to that this kind of animistic turn in the kind of environmental discourse that assign personalities and agenthood or spiritual significance to rivers and stuff. I think it could be good, but so far we haven't seen that has made much difference. So the Ganges River, for example, has been for thousands of years the most holy river in India, and one of the most holy gods, but it's also one of the most polluted rivers in the world. And unfortunately, it seems that for many politicians that believe in the godhood of Ganges, they use that as an argument for why the Ganges can fix its own problem, right? And if you look at the experience from how we solved or at least to some extent addressed many of the environmental problems here in Sweden or in Europe and the United States. We didn't do this by assigning agenthood to the Baltic. We did it by passing legislation to prevent, acid rain and to introduce katalysatorer. Well, that's the stuff that cleans the air from diesel engines, and so on and so forth. So I think that I don't mind this process of doing those things, but I think that the focus should be on passing regulations and making the fossil lobby more upset, because yeah, if they're not screaming, then we're doing something wrong.
I think both Cecilia.
Yeah, I would like to react on the Ganges, because actually the Ganges is a very interesting example. The Ganges should be much more polluted than it actually is. And the Ganges is special because it has 25 times more oxygen than any other river in the world. And that is because it comes from the Himalayas. So a part of that spirituality is true. And so this is fascinating we found that out recently, actually, that there is a truth in it, in that indigenous knowledge somehow that has been passed on over only 250,000 years that we are around. And so in terms of time, I want to add something else, so in fact we are also incredibly stupid, because we're burning things since 250,000 years, and we've been fighting actually wars against nature with fire. It was an amazing tool actually to make us survive, to cook food, to actually make us digest faster. But plants, species in general, every cell that we know is actually came alive by photosynthesis, which is almost 3,000 million years old and has slowly generated life on the planet. So I think there's a lot more in there. So while we built Future Island, actually, so we, in fact, looking forward 100 years made us look backward millions of years. And the fact that there are species here that lived through 2 mass extinctions, like mosses and fungi, and that maybe there's something more in this adaptation process, that we still have so much to dig out and to learn about this adaptation, what's possible, and that actually each mass extinction brought an explosion of life afterwards. So that might be bad news for us, but but yeah, in that sense, the planet's gonna be here. The planet is not going to die.
Cecilia, you wanted also to comment.
Well, thank you. This is so cool. I think that we can have both, thinking in terms of both, and we should have regulations, of course. But I also think that we are, like you're describing, engaging now in conversations across societies and cultures, really, where we are rethinking identity, actually, to a large degree. So, I mean, just going to my own little area, I love the humanities, but the humanities, like philosophy, art history, all these disciplines, But they have had a very bad tradition of keeping to a certain kind of defining some people as human and others as less than human, be it women, be it slaves, you know, that kind of legacies of thought that have really, you know, brought about, say, women's studies or gender studies or, you know, all these types of research. So I think that we need both kind of regulations. I think that is super important, and one doesn't disclose the other. We always need to think in the nested crisis that I'm talking about, or nested crises in plural. We need to always think in many terms and work on many settings at the same time, at the local level, at the little bit bigger level, at the super big level, and then back again, and then compare notes between different kinds of expertise and do everything we can. And I think we want to do that. I think that this is the time where we really want to do that.
Thank you. Sylvain?
Yeah, I just would like to talk about this, the way of conversation or the way of discussion. So there's a lot of antagonism and different, like the kind of standard discussion, like regulatory, political, societal, is probably not enough to engage most of the people or most of the population. So we need to really reinvent some other way of communicating or engaging a different part of the society to actually move this very crucial discussion outside the realm of stigmatization or antagonism. And that's what actually we try to do with this piece, is actually to bring a different way of a discursive way of also experiencing different things, so that basically somebody who would have different opinion could actually meet there and kind of have this contact and discussion.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I really believe so strongly in bridge building of all kinds, and I think that Future Island as a piece of art is kind of a little bit of a bridge building going on at so many levels. It brings in science, science communication and knowledge, communication of many kinds. It brings in a lot of philosophical issues, existential issues about the future, but also about us to try to draw us back to the time issue.
Brings in atmosphere as well.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The old rocks, the
Yeah.
ancient rocks.
Exactly. But can I take the opportunity? Because there was one thing that I hadn't thought of before, and that was when you were talking about soil, and that these, you know, all these plants being planted here, that they would actually turn into soil. Yes, but not in 100 years, right? Yeah? Yeah. Yeah.
I have to switch this on. When you make compost, so that's the organic, basically processes, and you mix that with minerals, and that becomes soil. That's what it is. Yeah.
And then there is a renewal.
Yeah, there's a constant renewal, a constant building up. So we'll have to see when the forest starts appearing, because that's part of the maintenance manual, right? That we just let it grow. And we observe, so we actually not entering Future Island, but we observing and learning. And actually, there's something about this, like being like building very small, but thinking very big, and actually acting, like you say, it's absolutely essential to act very big. And there was something beautiful. I wish everybody could experience this building with the rocks, because it was an incredibly grounding process. Like we came home, we had a dinner with friends, and they said, "Wow, you feel so grounded." And we were like, yeah, that's true. We actually just moved around tons and tons of rocks. And the slowness of this, to place one such rock, takes like, I don't know, the biggest one up to half an hour, makes you totally, give you a totally different feeling about things. It's almost like a meditation.
For sure. Very nice. Thank you, Eva, Sylvain, Marjetica, Cecilia, and Karim. I would like to open up to the audience because now, as you were saying, you've sort of come to the end of this creative process with the artwork, but now it's the time when it starts, when it sort of lands onto someone else's daily lives. I don't know if everyone here has had the chance so far to go to Campus Albano, but I strongly recommend that you do. If not, as you said, the island will be here for at least 100 years, we hope. So there is time. If there are any questions, you are very welcome. Yes? I think you would have to take a microphone, if that's okay. Yes, Christopher helps you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Evelina. Thank you for this very interesting presentation. And I have a question about the purpose. I have a question to the artist, actually, about the purpose of the work, because we've already heard a lot about the context, a bit of the history and the philosophical issues. But I'm just wondering, because when I was listening to your presentation, what came to my mind is a kind of similar project by Newton Harrison, Future Gardens, not Future Islands, but Future Gardens. And it was made with the Institute of Art and Science in California, Santa Cruz, after his wife died, Helen. And it was like he made 3 domes, and he invited his students to work with him to produce, to cultivate plants under the different temperatures, to test the adaptation under the droughts. And there were, just as with this artwork, there were the purpose was like there were different temperatures, 10 degrees more, 10 degrees more, and he was about to check what will be the solution, which kind of like he wanted to produce the scaffolding for the future adaptation. So my question to the artist is, because this project is clearly based on the contrast, warm and cold. Is it only to visualize the adaptation process, what will happen next in the future, or do you have any methodology for how to evaluate what will happen next, how to, in very short, how art is to convey science for this project? Thanks.
Actually, the purpose of this project is exactly what we're doing right now, to have these discussions. The purpose is outreach, to actually make it's like a conversation piece to get the discussion going between science and other, to get sort of out of the ivory tower of academia. Because it is not a scientific experiment. We learned this very early on, that we would need 50 such islands if it was a strictly scientific experiment. And like with the gardens, which you described, that you actually really test properly in very specific environments, it's not that. So we will learn something, but mainly it is to actually make something physical, and so that you can actually feel it and touch it. There's also a rock actually next to a visitor's bench, and this rock you can touch. So it's more about the physicality, that the physicality like makes you able to think in other ways that you haven't thought before.
Maybe, if I may jump in, we could also mention the sensors and the collaboration with Vetenskap,
yes, of
with the
course.
House of Science.
Okay, like we work with the Science House, and basically there will be a group of children coming on the island and basically looking at the island. So different workshops will happen. So it's again in this discourse, so the children will somehow visualize what they see, be in contact with the island and different themes that the Science House will explore. And basically this kind of connection to the island, this is what we're looking at. So it's as Eva says, it's a lot less scientific, it's more this discussion piece that we were looking at on this project.
There are several sensors on the island. measuring humidity and temperature of the ground, but also of the air. And the students of the Science House will actually visualize these the changes in time on the island via the website of the Science House. Yeah, the data will be. Yeah. So you have different levels of monitoring and observing the island apart from the gardening team that are also briefed what to look at. The Future Island landscape has a completely different maintenance than the surrounding park. I think it's very important to emphasize this. It's a landscape of pioneer plants that are actually showing the slow time. So it looks different, but also it behaves different, and its time is very slow.
I could say it like we're not giving a solution here. We're just opening doors to possibilities and mostly discursive possibilities.
But as we said earlier, creating new imaginaries and starting a conversation is the necessary first step to then come into action, and whether that action might take the shape of regulation or other kinds of intervention. I wonder if there's anyone else. Yes, we have 2 more questions here.
Hi, my name is Peter Lynch. I'm a KTH researcher, and I'm working on a biodiversity garden in Norrköping, not far from Linköping, called Timescape Garden. Cool. You might have heard of it. There we're trying to deal with the same problem, perhaps, by making the place more hospitable to biodiversity, introducing species that are not native to Sweden, and monitoring them with a kind of sophisticated system to see which are good for pollinators, which will thrive there and support pollinators. So we're kind of taking the opposite path. Rather than making half of the place less hospitable to life, which you seem to be anticipating by the images, it's not pure speculation that half of the place will become drier, that the plants that you have picked are not drought-resistant plants, that they will die, that other plants perhaps will move in. So you have created a situation of a degraded environment to show us the degradation. Now, I feel like the real experiment that you're performing is a moral and ethical experiment. Karim mentioned the moral dilemmas that are brought up by the climate crisis. And Cecilia, you mentioned the complexities, the ethical complexities that we're engaged in. I feel like you have created a moral dilemma for us because you have given a government-sanctioned project to create a degraded environment. Now, that is so. It is a degraded environment. If the temperature rises 2 degrees, your area will be 7 degrees warmer. You're anticipating the worst case, and you're compounding whatever will happen by 5 degrees. So there's no mystery that it will be degraded, and you will be able to point, school children will be able to see that this is what we're in for. But you have created a situation that's ethically problematic. I would like to go there and take the hoses out, the heating pipes out, so that that place would perhaps become more hospitable. In other words, you invite me to take responsibility, to counteract a willful act of harm. That's the way it appears to me. Now, there have been very famous experiments in history that have involved creating a situation where there's sanctioned apparent harm. One is called the Milgram experiment. And the question is whether people will go along with something that an authority sanctions and they believe that it actually creates harm. The shocking thing is that many do go along with it. And we are told that this is a very good, hopeful project. But my feeling is that it's a very bleak project, and I feel challenged by it. And if I were an eco-terrorist, I would cut those hoses.
May I? Yeah.
Actually, super interesting because this morning I read about a project of Marina Abramovic. I think it's called Phase Zero. Lotta, I don't know exactly Phase Zero. And she stood in a gallery for 6 hours, and she had several violent instruments laying in front of her, and she invited the public to do harm to her. And the shocking thing was that how many people actually did. She almost died. And let's say when we did I somehow agree, when we did drill the rocks, it was a very violent act, and it felt like this is exactly what we are doing to the planet, these heating pipes. So I think we don't have to take them out on Future Island, but we have to take them out on a global scale. That is the challenge.
Isn't every part of the earth worth protecting and uplifting and making more hospitable? The artist speaks about the knowledge gained from indigenous peoples. Is there any indigenous people that would willfully create a degraded environment for the land that they love?
But you say that you live in degraded environment. So, it's always back and forth. I could also ask you, why you bring invasive, I don't know, not plants, but animals to the environment that may cause harm. Like I'm thinking now about rabbits in Australia. It's not a rocket science. We are humans who are doing all of this to the planet Earth
but
in
it
our
is
local environment.
May I
It is
briefly
science.
jump in?
It is science. In other words, there is introduction of species that is harmful and others that are not. There is a knowledge base.
Let me just jump in because Karim had a comment.
I wanted to give another perspective on what you're saying. So what part of my research, we're doing some research applications on animal suffering and animal welfare. And one of the interesting things is that most animals that suffer horribly are wild animals. So by biomass, fish are 32% of all animal biomass. And probably most fish have horrible, horrible lives where they get eaten alive and they starve to death and they get parasites and so on. And not to talk, if we believe that arthropods, that is insects and ants and shrimp, if we believe that they're sentient, that their ability to suffer, then the world contains so much more suffering that we could ever imagine. The arthropods are by biomass 42% of all animals, and on average arthropods are pretty small, so that means that they're the overwhelming majority of individuals. So this world that we have, this wild world that we have, it's just, I don't know if it's in fact true that arthropods are sentient, but if they are, there's a shocking amount of suffering that is just overwhelming. Just try to think about it. So I think, in light of that, it feels like this harm that you've done, so-called harm, I don't know, maybe you have, by preventing wild animals from existing from a patch of this planet, you've prevented some suffering. So that's another perspective. If you care about suffering and you believe that non-human animals can suffer, arthropods or fish and so on, then we should really reconsider the kind of beauty of nature, because it's just like I see nature as a gigantic concentration camp that's been ongoing for 1 billion years, and it's going to go on for at least another 1 billion years, and it just horrifies me every day. This is kind of what I'm very upset about.
Thank you.
Sorry to be so gloomy, but
Cecilia.
I'm thinking about what the artwork also do, that it creates a lot of different stories, and it creates scientific stories. Science is also a form of storytelling. Having an article is a form of, we always have to convince, as researchers and scientists. And I do believe that actually creating stories and bringing stories together is really important, and bringing, you know, the stories of science, because I really believe in science, just to underline that, and the stories of philosophy, the histories of the humanities, and bringing in new ways of thinking from the more than human humanities actually is super important. And I think that this work actually do bring in all these stories in conversation. And of course there will be friction. Of course there will be stuff going on. And that's the beauty of it. That's part of the reimagining that we need, I think.
I wanted to add also, just like Karim said earlier, like I'm producing carbon dioxide as I speak, which is in the end harmful to the planet, but I think we all agree, we're very thankful that some kind of interventions, even if they have a byproduct, take place, because they allow us to take action and make change happen at a bigger scale. So in the big scheme of things, I would also like to thank you for this intervention, whatever. I think the artwork as such is successful if it creates this kind of debates. So it's a good roundup, I think. There was another question, and with that, I'm afraid we're gonna have to start rounding up, but you've been waiting for a little bit, so thank you.
Thank you. Sorry for being the loss. This project is so overwhelming. Thank you. So I was just curious about, have you, I missed it maybe, have you always been working together, or is this the first project, the three of you, or is this the first time?
I can say we worked together for 15 years on public art projects, and we work in a very intense collaborations. No one is, it's just like a common work. And maybe this project is also an example of, as I said at the beginning, of collaborative processes that are now becoming slowly a part of the making of public art projects, because they used to be just like objects frozen in time as a decorative objects put in the landscape as an afterthought. But we have been like engaged in design and thinking about all of also the landscape, which is not Future Island at Albano campus, together with the crew, like the landscape architects, with workers and so on.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think the process of collaborating is actually amazing, because each time, so when we collaborate together, but also with the scientists together and with the curators, basically a lot of troubleshooting happens, a lot of bad ideas or maybe less successful are getting eliminated much more quickly. So in that sense, this model is, I find it really inspiring and very valid.
Thank you, Eva. Thank you very much. And on that cue, I would also like to remind the audience that if you want to know more about Future Island, we have an exhibition on the 5th floor. You can reach it through the elevator. That will give you access to a film where the artistic team explains more about the artwork. And you can even see some of the plants and some of the rocks. I hope we haven't done much harm by bringing them here. But and that you will find on the area we call Verket. On the other side, you can also see another ongoing public commission we have. It's a 15-meter-long model of an artwork called Rainbow Snake that we're working with in Gothenburg. We'll have a program on that coming up at some point in the beginning of next year, most likely. But for today, again, I would like to invite you to take a quick look at the exhibition. We'll have it open until, as I said, January. And once again, a warm thank you to Karim, Cecilia, Marjetica, Sylvain, and Eva. Thanks so much and congratulations.
Thank you, Alba.